Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Former WBC featherweight champion Gary Russell believes he'll walk through Edwin De Los Santos. He's not sharp enough, and I find that a little hard to believe when he couldn't walk through Mark Pacquiao at 126. He's going to walk through Edwin at 135?
No.
I don't think so. It's been a while since fans have seen Gary Russell in the ring. The former featherweight champion has been out of sight and out of mind since losing his title to Mark Pacquiao in January of 2022. That's roughly 2 years ago. We're in January of 2024 now.
No.
In addition to undergoing shoulder surgery, Russell simply hasn't been interested in jumping back in the mix with just anyone. As for where he sees himself competing, his days at 126 are essentially over with. Moving up one weight class is normally the pragmatic move for most fighters, but Russell believes he needs a 2-division reprieve.
It's too fucking small.
If what he's thinking is that he's going to go from losing a decision to Mark Pacquiao 2 years ago at 126 to move straight up to 135 2 years later to box a big, strong kid like Edwin De Los Santos, well, he's too fucking old, he's too fucking small, and he's too fucking inactive. Even when he was a champion, even when he had the WBC title, he was averaging 1 fight a year for about 5 years.
He was never that active, and you could make the argument that that's a big part of why he was never that popular.
Going up to 135 pounds could give Russell a ton of options. Of course, the aging veteran would rather fight for a world title in his debut. If, however, that isn't possible, and it isn't, he admitted that he wouldn't have an issue taking on a highly ranked contender like Edwin De Los Santos. I can see that, said Russell during an interview with Mill City Boxing while nodding. I can see that. De Los Santos is 24, needs a feel-good story following his close but clear defeat at the hands of Shakur S. Stevenson on the night. The Dominican did his best to corner Stevenson and let his hands go, but it was Stevenson who was 2 steps ahead.
Gary Russell says things just to say things. He talks because he's got a mouth, in a nutshell.
Remember in 2020 when he said that he would move up to 147 pounds to box Terrence Crawford? Remember when he was in talks to potentially fight Devin Haney? Do you remember all that stuff? He never followed up on any of it. Now he says that he'd be willing to move up from 126 up to 135 to box Edwin De Los Santos, who's coming off that loss to Shakur. That was his first crack at a world title, but De Los Santos is hoping that it won't be his last. Russell, to a certain degree, is looking to bounce back himself. He hasn't jumped into the ring in nearly 2 years. It's been 2 years, 2 roughly, and is desperate to get back in the mix, making De Los Santos the perfect opponent. As for how a showdown between them would play out, Russell doesn't believe that the issues De Los Santos gave Stevenson would happen if they shared the ring. I'll spank his ass. He's definitely got some pop, but he's wild. He's not sharp enough. And you are? After 2 years of inactivity.
Gary is too fucking old, too fucking small, and too fucking inactive. I don't know that he's gonna follow up on any of the things he's saying.
Then why bother doing a segment on him?
Because of the Amazon deal.
I thought about what it is the PBC is working with these days. What is it they have planned? What is it they have in store for this year now that they're in bed with Amazon? And there are some obvious answers, like 2 Gervonta Davis fights, maybe 2 Canelo fights, maybe the Spence versus Crawford fight. But on the undercards of those fights, on the undercards of those shows, what are we going to see?
What?
We're going to see a quasi-retired Gary Russell Jr.? When you think about what it is the PBC has left, inactive Gary, inactive Keith Thurman,
Inactive Luis Ortiz, an aging Luis Ortiz, as Andy Ruiz and Deontay Wilder, they've jumped ship. They're in bed with the Saudis now.
what is it that remains of the PBC stable? What are they bringing to the table now that they're in bed with Amazon? What kind of fights with what kind of fighters are we looking at? Because they don't have an assembly line of young lions the same way the Top Rank does. At Top Rank, you've got Bruce Carrington and Tiger Johnson, Abdullah Mason,
Keyshawn Davis and Richard Torres, Jared Anderson.
You've got Fernando Vargas' kid over there, and this is all on top of their already established names. They're already established fighters like Vasyl Lomachenko, like Shakur Stevenson, Emmanuel Navarrete, Oscar Valdez, so on and so forth, that you see, Top Rank has the next generation of flag bearers to carry the banner. But the PBC, what do they have? A quasi-retired Gary Russell Jr. in his 30s.
It's not even that he's talking about fighting Edwin De Los Santos at lightweight that has my attention. It's that he's still around. And this is what remains of the PBC stable. This is the kind of fighter
they're gonna market fights for guys like this. Is that what they're gonna do with this Amazon deal? Those 12 to 14 fight dates they're said to have.
It's not looking good. That's what I see.
When you go as far as dedicating a slot on the undercard of Morrell versus Egbeco to two 40-year-olds in Andre Berto and Robert Guerrero for a rematch that no one was asking for, when you go as far as doing that, it says it all, really.
Supposed to be talk about a Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao rematch.
Manny Pacquiao was brought into the ring during Rizen's New Year's Eve event in Japan and claimed he's fighting Floyd Mayweather in an exhibition rematch this year, as was previously discussed a year ago. No confirmation from Mayweather as of yet. We don't know if there will be any involvement from the PBC or Amazon per their Amazon deal.
Not that I'm actually interested in seeing today's version of Floyd and Manny waltz around the ring in a non-fight, in an exhibition match. But my, how the mighty have fallen.
Immediately after their initial meeting, immediately after Maypac, what was it, 7 or 8 years ago, there was a desire to see a second fight. There was value in a rematch, but I feel like that ship has sailed. That time has come and gone. Who wants to see a 40, 42, 43-year-old Pacquiao in there with a 44, 45-year-old Floyd Mayweather? Who wants to pay to see that?
I don't.
Maybe the Japanese fight fans want to see it. Kind of like how old hip-hop acts from the 90s and early 2000s, while they may not be popular on American soil anymore, overseas, they can still sell tickets. They can still sell out shows. Maybe it's a situation like that?
Maybe.
I vaguely recall Floyd saying last year that he planned on doing more exhibitions and Rizin would be involved. So this news is more or less in keeping with what we heard last year, though we've yet to see confirmation from Floyd that one of those exhibition matches will involve Manny.
Who cares?
Surveying the landscape and looking at the whole picture, the state of the PBC, what remains of their stable, and what was intended to be their figurehead, the name that helped get the PBC off the ground, the name of Floyd Mayweather and his association with Al Heyman and his PBC, and just how are these guys holding up all these years later? Seems like a stale stage act.
It all seems very dated, doesn't it?
I mean, we just saw two 40-year-olds in Robert Guerrero and Andre Berto on the undercard of Egbeco versus Morrell. So Gary Russell moving up to 135 for Edwin De Los Santos, it might not be as far-fetched as it sounds. That Gary is old and inactive and very much quasi-retired, but that's your average PBC fighter, isn't it?
So it's business as usual at the PBC.
Are we with this at the moment? Has there been any conversations about this fight still potentially taking place?
No, the fight's dead. I mean,
right
for
now.
Listen, yeah, you never know what's going to happen in the future. But we had both signed contracts to announce the fight that night. So, obviously, subject to everybody winning. Literally, since I left the venue that night to about 20 minutes ago, I've been speaking to His Excellency non-stop to decide what we're going to do. Obviously, AJ is the hot commodity right now. Yeah, I mean, I don't rule it out. It's just that the people who wanted to put the fight on no longer see that as the fight that is the fight that it was. So obviously the negotiations that have taken place up till that point to agree the deal, the numbers don't work now because...
Of course, Deontay Wilder couldn't hold up his end of the bargain because once again, as it pertains to the Anthony Joshua fight, Wilder fumbled the bag, and that's not even the first time that's happened, but I notice in the media, they don't scrutinize him and they don't criticize him the way they criticize Anthony Joshua, even when he wins, even when he holds up his end of the bargain. Perhaps he doesn't look the greatest doing it all the time, but he does it, and for that, he's constantly scrutinized, constantly criticized. But Wilder can go out there for 36 minutes doing laps around the ring, running away from Joseph Parker and it just feels like they're going easy on him.
Because why are people still asking if the fight is on? Why are people still asking if the fight can happen? Had it been Anthony that lost on Saturday instead of Deontay, would they still be asking these questions?
I want to play a clip for you guys from the Boxing Voice. A caller that called into the Boxing Voice ahead of the Day of Reckoning card. His insights, an obvious Deontay Wilder supporter. This is what he had to say.
First time in years we finally got AJ and Wilder to agree to a fight. Everybody talks about Wilder don't fight nobody, Wilder a bum. We've been hearing this shit for years, but
Well, what do you expect?
I'm crazy, I'm confused. Brazil fights AJ, Brazil goes 1 round with Wilder.
How many years after AJ knocked him out?
Helenius fights AJ, Helenius goes 1 round with Wilder.
How about this one? How about AJ beats Joseph Parker and Deontay Wilder doesn't? How about that one?
I'm just confused here. Now he's fighting Parker, and I can guarantee you that he whoops his ass
Guarantee, you say? Well, that's a guarantee that aged like an avocado.
worse than anybody's ever whooped his ass. But Wilder don't fight nobody. Why come the fuck you can't whoop their ass like Wilder do?
Well, Wilder didn't exactly whoop Joseph Parker's ass now, did he?
I'm just confused here, but let's move on. I believe AJ's gonna win, right? But if AJ doesn't win, it's not because Wilder is better. It's because he don't want to fight fucking Wilder. The only way he could lose is because he don't want to fight Wilder.
Well, since AJ's the one that won and Wilder's the one that lost, does that mean that Wilder lost because he didn't want to fight AJ?
I pray, if I really prayed for boxers, which I fucking don't, but if I did, I would pray that he beats Wilder so we can see that fight.
Deontay Wilder's fans.
Morons.
And their stupidity is a reflection of Wilder's stupidity, a reflection of Wilder's arrogance.
Now that the smoke is settled and the outcomes have been decided, what tune do you think that caller is singing now? Is he holding Wilder's feet to the fire after the Day of Reckoning the way he was holding Anthony's feet to the fire before the Day of Reckoning?
Do you think that same caller that called into the Boxing Voice before the show, do you think he's now calling into the Boxing Voice after the show to trash Deontay for not holding up his end of the bargain? He virtually guaranteed, no, he outright guaranteed that Wilder would make short work of Joseph Parker. We now know that he didn't. It was the exact opposite. He got bullied by Joseph Parker for 36 minutes. And do you think that caller that called in, do you think he's now calling into the Boxing Voice to say, you know what? Maybe Deontay Wilder's not what I thought he was.
Wilder, who immediately after losing to Joseph Parker in Saudi Arabia, he goes over to 78 Sports and he starts trashing AJ again, saying that AJ never wanted to fight him anyway.
He starts singing the same tune. He starts up with the conspiracy theories again. And to those conspiracy theories, this is what veteran boxing scribe Chris Mannix had to say about it.
That are out there. So it's been so crazy to see him devolve into this conspiracy theorist. Like the conspiracy theories he had after that second fight against Tyson Fury about the gloves and all the angles he's showing on video, the crazy stuff he was saying after that fight. And then the costume, like that, only he knows the answer to that question. If that was really heavy, I don't know. But, you know, immediately after he leaves Saudi Arabia, he does this YouTube interview where he says that Anthony Joshua was happy that Deontay Wilder lost that fight. Never really wanted that fight. There was all this rumors that he was going to retire if Wilder had won that fight. Let me tell you something, Kevin, because I was there and I can tell you that there was a whole elaborate thing planned if Wilder had won and if AJ had won. The contracts were done. AJ was going to do his interview. Wilder was going to come to the ring. I was going to bring both of them together. There'd be some, social media worthy moment, and we'd be building towards March. Anthony Joshua was taking that fight. It was done. He was taking that fight. He wanted that fight. It's crazy to think that AJ was happy that Deontay Wilder lost, because now AJ's probably, I say probably because there are a lot of things that can happen, but probably going to have to go into a fight against Filip Hrgović, which is tough. Like, that's a tough fight. Filip Hrgović is really good. And he's certainly not going to bring the kind of cachet and the kind of money that a Deontay Wilder fight 100%. Would bring. So him, Kevin, going down these conspiracy theory rabbit holes just drive me crazy. And he does them oftentimes in interview settings where nobody calls him out on it. Like, everybody just lets him go and say these things, and he just kind of gets away with it. I just think the whole it's tough to watch because he is such a great guy. And he's been such a great fighter. And you don't want to see him go out like this, but he's going out in one of the worst possible ways that he could go out.
He's going out sad. And what Deontay Wilder really is a failed experiment, a failed campaign to reanimate the heavyweight scene in America. The reason that it feels like so many pundits and so many fight fans go easy on Deontay is because some, though not all, but some, they viewed Deontay Wilder as the last effort to bring heavyweight boxing back to America, the heavyweight crown. And they had so much invested in Deontay Wilder that they overlooked.
They overlooked how poor his resume is, how poor his skill set is.
They overlooked his poor character and how he's a poor sportsman after you admitted that you're the one that walked away from the AJ fight when they offered you all that money, that $100 million. You try to blame AJ for the fight not happening. You're putting it on them after you admitted that, and here and now, you lose to Joseph Parker. You failed to hold up your end of the bargain. You're talking about the most money that you can hope to get in boxing today. The Saudis are footing the bill, and all you have to do is beat the same guy that Anthony beat years ago. Beat the same guy that Dillian White beat years ago. You know, they don't think much of Anthony and Dillian in the American boxing scene. But what does it say that they've both been there and done that with Joseph Parker, but Wilder, the Bronze Bomber, couldn't make it past him, couldn't beat him.
He got bullied by him for 36 minutes.
Wilder doesn't live up to the expectations set before him. Try as they might to sell him as this legendary fighter and this legendary puncher. As soon as they stepped him up, that's as soon as it took for him to get exposed. The version of Tyson Fury you fought was a recovering addict, battling obesity and depression. And
that was too much for him. They put him in there with Joseph Parker, who doesn't have the reputation that Wilder has, who doesn't have a reputation of being a killer or being a dog. And he proved he's got too much dog for Wilder. He dogged out Wilder for 36 minutes.
And I'm just left wondering, at what point do you guys admit that you got it wrong? At what point do you stop pulling punches when it comes to Deontay and just say, this guy's not who I thought he was. This guy's a hype job. I mean, the writing's been on the wall the whole time. You guys just didn't want to read it. But even now that he loses to Joseph Parker of all people,
what's it gonna take?
The problem I see in the American fight fan, the problem I see with the Americans is that they're more concerned with how things sound and how things look than how things are. Somebody sold you on this idea that Wilder is this menacing figure for beating 32 or 33 tomato cans the first 7 years of his career. They fooled you, and you can't admit it.
The reputation that he has as this legendary knockout merchant is built on the backs of fat cruiserweights, club fighters, and no-hopers. That's who he knocked out. That's where that knockout percentage comes from.
If AJ spent the first 7 years of his career feasting on no-hopers like Wilder did, he'd be called the Bronze Bomber.
Well, if Derek Chisora fought the same guys that Wilder fought, the same exact guys for the first 7 years of his career, Derek would be called the Bronze Bomber.
Moral of the story is that Wilder's a hype job, and just because he's American, that doesn't change that.
Was never who you thought he was.